read heavy books if you're in the right headspace. Like, do not read heavy book after heavy book. It'll put you in a really negative, depressing headspace. But these books are still important to get published and be told. But if you're reading diversely, don't only seek out these types of stories. This is an Indigenous author and this is a Syrian author. You have to read other stories by authors from those backgrounds or different times in history. One voice doesn't speak for the masses, and one story doesn't speak for an entire people's experience and existence. Book creator labeled this book as trauma. That isn't doing justice to what the book is trying to accomplish. So I want to talk about it. The Berry Pickers is about an Indigenous family in Maine that are berry pickers, and their very young daughter goes missing very early on in the book. I'm showing the perspective of the family and how they're having to deal with this, and the daughter's perspective. There are some heavy topics covered in this book, but it's also exposing the issues in our society that kind of allow for this type of trauma to be perpetuated. For instance, police officer that's brought or talked to kind of search for the young girl dismisses it. This is a huge issue in Indigenous communities, which is why the MMIW crisis is a crisis. And on top of that, we see this with Black youth as well, where they're labeled as runaways and so they're not actually searched for. It covers decades of showing realities of and bringing a human perspective of what the time actually looked like. It starts in 1962. So when I think about trauma, I think about it as like trauma that's inserted into the story, and if you take it out, it doesn't change the story, the character growth, anything at all. And it's basically put in to get a rise out of a viewer, of a reader. This book doesn't do that because very clearly telling a story through the lens of what certain characters have to go through. And that's why I listened to it on audio at the library, and then I went out and picked it up and bought it. Shortly after, I read or listened to As Long as the Lemon Tree Grows. It is also a very heavy book. It is covering the Syrian war, how trauma affects your body, your mind, the communities that were impacted by the conflict. It is an incredibly devastating read. Author's note at the end of this book perfectly highlights that you should not view people as their trauma, but that they are very deserving of joy and life and a community and like having the ability to build the life that they want out of joy and flourish. And that's a part of the story. But it's also showcasing the realities of war.